Hi everybody. At the end of the last session, Penny and I looked at the Slido questions and we thought there were a few questions that were worth addressing. We decided to do this bonus video to try to answer them for the audience that attended the talk. So there are 5 questions that we picked and we categorized them into 2 groups. The first one is the best practices in relating with elderly persons, and then the other one is relating with seniors without an agenda. Are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so these are the 5 questions. The first question is, could you please share effective ways to connect with elderly individuals who are hard of hearing or who have cognitive decline due to dementia? And shall we just do the second question also and you answer together? Okay, so the second question is, how to validate and normalize the feelings of an elderly person who is cognitively impaired. I think the person specified elderly with dementia. Okay, take it away.
Okay, so I think during the talk itself, I gave an example. My father-in-law, who we're not sure that excuse me, we're not sure that he has any idea of what's going on, but then to just be with them, exercising your presence with them and talking to them, and perhaps even just the steps that I talked about to validate, normalize, reframe, and offer resources, etc. I think we can still do that because there are moments when they are lucid or maybe clear-minded and they can receive. At least to me, I don't know when those moments are, and so what we want to do is just to be able to do that at any time, because you don't know when that is the moment. So I think that we can continue to validate their feelings, what they're telling you, and perhaps sometimes to kind of answer in shorter sentences rather than in long validation sentences that consist of many words that a normal person is able to maybe comprehend. Yeah. Then the other thing also I wanted to say on top of this is also this. I take it out the dementia patients or the elderly, but for normal people, sometimes there's a tendency to repeat themselves, especially when they don't feel heard. So we see this a lot in counseling as well. So being able to just be there, and kind of reiterate to say that, this is what I'm hearing you say, and just to validate that. Yeah. And lastly, also, I just want to add one more thing, and I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, some time ago, and where Kelvin was telling me the story also, that sometimes when we, be there with the person, it's not just all the words that we say, but also just our presence sometimes, being there, like what Kevin does sometimes is just to be there with them in music, I think I also gave this example during the talk itself, where you're just being there, maybe sometimes if they allow you, or holding their hands, or stroking them, or just being there with them. I think they feel it. Sometimes it's not all words, but also I think that I want to emphasize the presence. Your presence is felt.
Yeah. I just want to relate a story, right? So I volunteer in this assisted living home, and then sometimes we are singing these like Elvis Presley songs because that's what the seniors love to sing. And one of the patients I won't call it a patient, she's a resident. She would just break into Christmas carols in the middle of a Elvis Presley song. And what we do is just sing along with her, rather than try to say, hey, you're kind of spoiling our flow. We just sing along and she totally enjoys it. Yeah, so it's just like not trying to correct them and just being there with them and flowing with it.
Yeah. And also sometimes I know answering questions as if, and sometimes they repeat themselves, right? Because with their dementia, sometimes they don't remember that they've asked before. But you just answer them the same way as if, it was the first time it was being asked. I think that, really helps them to not put them in an awkward position or put them in a place per se.
Correct. Yeah. So are we ready for the third question?
Sure.
Okay, the third question is, our volunteers are all wired differently. How can we get everyone on board to exercise discerning care to the elderly we are reaching?
Okay. I think to answer this question, it is not really different from the 4 steps that I've talked about during the talk itself the other day, where we validate, normalize, reframe, and offer, whatever resources that's possible. I think that it's a general framework that people can take to use it according to however they want to do it. Sometimes, like I said earlier, it could be that it's more of validating or more of normalizing, or just sometimes just being there, being present. Yeah.
We don't have to have all the 4 steps in place all the time.
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. We move on to the second block of questions, and that would be relating to seniors without an agenda. So this question is, how do we put aside our agendas? And the example that's given is, for example, organizational KPIs, like you have to, your routine as a volunteer, you have to go and find out how much sleep the person is having, what the eating patterns are, that is the example that was given, organizational KPI linked with agenda.
Okay. Actually, when you said, that, for example, the find out how much one sleeps and all that, and answering those questions, I don't actually look at them as an agenda. It's more of, these are things that you possibly want to find out a bit more about them. And actually, you can turn that into how you build the bridge, kind of being concerned about them, asking them things. And these are just questions, really, rather than an agenda. Yeah, and using them to just build a rapport with them, to find out, instead of kind of taking the paper and say, okay, so how many hours you sleep? You instead of answering the questions like a questionnaire or doing an interview, you can use that to show concern and show your love for them. Yeah.
Okay, and we move to the last question, which I think is the real agenda question. How do you not have an agenda when you actually do? For example, you're doing a visitation for the sake of evangelism. And the question is, how do you not have an agenda when you do? Would it feel inauthentic if you say you don't have an agenda?
Yes, well, that's a really good question, I think. And I wanted to say this, that when I mentioned having an agenda, it's really when you go in with the thinking that, and I said this again at the presentation itself, that when you go in, it's like saying, you need us, you need God. And we all know that, you need church. But when we do that, it's not being authentic, because I think, we need to be, if I put it this way, we need to be the incarnation of God, of Christ to them, right? How we show love. And if I take the Samaritan, the parable of the Samaritan, for example, a lot of people, the Pharisee, the Levites walked past the injured man, but they didn't stop to really minister to that guy, right? But here comes a Samaritan who picked him up and do all these things with the injured man, and even offered to pay the innkeeper, for his recovery and all that. And I think that we need to do that. We need to not just have words or have an agenda in that, say, oh, you need to come to us or you need us, but really we are going there to do what we are supposed to do, which is to put into action what we are called to do. Like I think I mentioned about loving our neighbor, right? And putting that into action. What does that mean? Because I can very easily say, oh, I love you and I really care for you, but these are words. But what does it look like when in practice, really? And I think that would be the way, what I mean, the difference between having an agenda and not having an agenda, rather, but to be an incarnation of Christ to them. And I wanted to also share a story with you that I heard from a pastor friend of mine just recently. And although this gentleman, so I give you the story. He's now in his 20s, but at 18 years old he was a delinquent, and he's a British guy. At 18 was a delinquent, and he was kicked out of his house, and he lived in his car for a whole year. And so, washing is difficult, everything is difficult for him, whether it's washing himself or the laundry or whatever. But one day he met a friend that from secondary school. And so the friend, knowing his condition, said, hey, why don't you come and, come to our house for dinner? And invited him for dinner. And his parents, the friend's parents, were in the house. and they had dinner together. And then when the parents heard about his condition, living in the car and all that, the parents actually invited him to come stay with them, right? And they're a Christian family, and and so while they were doing that, they were asking, "Oh, would you like to come to church?" But this guy, being a delinquent, is like, "No, just don't talk to me about God. Talk to me about Christ." And that's how they ministered to him in love, right? Without pastoring him, without an agenda, meaning that, "Oh, I want him to I want eventually get him to church." Don't have that agenda. The agenda is just really to be, be loving to him, to be accepting of him. And after 1 year, I mean, not exactly 1 year, but thereabouts. So one Sunday, the father asked the delinquent guy at the time, he said, "Oh, what are you doing today?" And that was a Sunday morning. "What are you doing today?" "Oh, nothing, He said, "Oh, good. Hey, we are going to church. Do you want to come along?" And he did. And there was nothing in there that it's kind of like the father it wasn't an agenda. It just came out, that very naturally. And they showed concern. And when they were showing concern for the whole year, they didn't have an agenda to say, "Oh, one day we have to bring him to church." It wasn't that. So I'm bringing up the story just to say that's what it means when we say we have an agenda versus one we don't. All we are doing is really just showing love, care, and concern, whether it's for the delinquent or for an elderly.
And I imagine that the family would still have continued to extend the love if he said no to going to church that day.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so we have come to the end of this video segment. Thanks for joining us, and this is our special gift to you, the extra bonus. Thanks, Penny, for doing this for us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.